So I've been building a pool for the past week and a half, and
Forever.
because the way fate works, or God hates me, or likes to me learn patience, he decided that he would end the 2-year drought Nebraska had been in the weekend. I rented a ditch witch and started leveling my pool.
That's the best time to do it. Yeah.
And so this phrase kept going over and over in my head. Like, I am the wrong kind of engineer for this project. I'm a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, highly educated individual. And I'm sitting here trying to level Earth and fight rain and work a skid loader and figure out how to rebalance my deck structure so that I can get in and out and lengthen my pool. And I'm like, I am the wrong kind of engineer for this project. But then, like, Skip and I are trying to figure out what the podcast episode is going to be. And, like, we had some pretty good topics over the last 4 or 5 weeks. Let's do a fun one where, like, in IT, it's not just IT, but we have to do engineering of all kinds. And like, you're running just wires. Just the idea of running wires, it's fine. But then you come across a situation in an old building, and you're like, crap, I got to get through this wall somehow.
Yep.
This is a firewall. Am I allowed to get through this wall? Can I run my wire here?
What do I have to do to patch it up?
Underneath this other area? How much pressure can this take?
And
we're the wrong kinds of engineers. So I learned, and I did my first IT job back in the mid 90s, was running wires through old schools, going coax to Cat5 conversion. And so we would run across the weirdest stuff in these schools, because these schools, remember, we're in Nebraska, so our schools don't get turned over every 20 years like the rest of you guys. Our schools are like 100 years old. And so we're like climbing through the ceiling, running these cables behind us. And all of a sudden the entire space opens up. Mm-hmm. You're where the gym used to be. And so you're in the ceiling with another 20 feet above you in the ceiling. So it's like you're in this mini coliseum and the balcony all of a sudden. And you got to get across this entire like expanse to the other side. And it's like, okay, how do I do this? Am I allowed to do this? Can I run wires this way? And so I know for a fact that in these ceilings, there's a lot of janky stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, this is actually kind of the part I like about IT, in that we get involved in so many other industries or topics or just things. I was working with a hospital many years ago, and we were doing a lot. They were transforming from, the old mini mainframe sort of to PC kind of conversions. They were late on the deal. I'm not quite that old. All right. They were late to get this updated. And so, we're doing all these things, and I'm working with them, and I'm not sure exactly how it's worded or the letters in it, but it's a JOCO certification. All right. And so that is for hospitals, small hospitals, and the, regulatory stuff. And of all the things, at least on a subset, I got familiar with some of the parameters and requirements for that. Why would I do that? I'm not medically trained in any way, but I got, familiar with some of the things I had to do because technology impacted that. And for me, I enjoy that diversity. Now, the bad side comes in is I, have no real expertise in that. So I'm figuring everything out as it goes. So maybe I've got some good solutions and maybe some not so good solutions. And we've all been in the wiring closets where an IT guy had a not so good solution to the problem. But, it's fun. It's fun work to do.
Yeah. And I think it's also got some humility for me because I've seen the closet where the guy said, "Oh, I'll just patch this really quick." No. You're going to tuck that stuff back and you're going to put it through the rails.
Yes. Absolutely.
So now when I'm running a skid loader, I'm like, "Oh, I got this." No, I stop. I ask the guy over here for questions. And, like, hey, this guy like looks like he's seen like the last 300 years in the sun. And, he he's running skid loaders left and right out there. I'm like, I'm going to ask this guy. So what tips do you have? And that guy's a freaking savant when it comes to skid loaders.
Yes.
And he gives me tips and stuff like that, and it helps me out. And then I asked other people, like, hey, I'm going to be packing down a pool. And a friend of mine's like, okay, well, here's the weight, the load rating for this kind of soil, this kind of fill, this kind of dirt, what you need to worry about, how to correctly put it into place, and all things I would have never thought of,
right?
Because I'm the wrong kind of engineer, and I'm working my best. I'm doing as best I can, and I'm intelligent, but does not mean I'm experienced.
Yes.
And there's very little that makes up for experience.
That's true. Well, and I think we got a good perspective. I mean, we understand technical complexities. You've been given, a network, all right, and you've got to subdivide this out now. You need some domains to route with. You need some user domains, and well, how are we going to do this? And you've been through the class and you've done the binary manual stuff, right? So, but you've got your tools, you got your calculators, and you plug all this in. So all the backgrounds, but then you hit these things outside of technology. And I think a lot of us recognize, oh, there's a whole nother world out here. There's a whole nother calculator. How are we going to do soil compression, and plug it in? And part of me wants to find the tools. I guess I am just the tool guy. Show me that. And if I put in some variables here, what does it look like? And and then I start experimenting. I do an estimate in my head, and then I start plugging things in. And am I kind of close? Do I really understand this? It's cool. It's a little distracting, maybe sometimes, so when the project manager calls and goes, hey, you were just supposed to install a switch. You've been out there for 2 days, and they're like, you go, all right, well, when we got here, and then it's this big long thing, why do you need a forklift? You were IT guys and you requisition a forklift. Well, there's this. And it's just, for me, it's fun. It's the exciting part about technology. While I'm a techie guy, I love technology. But if I were only sitting on the keyboard, just looking at a technical configuration screen all day, every day for the last 30 years, I would have gone bonkers by now. Yeah. So I like the connections that we get.
Yeah, your forklift reminded me of a time we were removing a foundry switch, and I cannot remember what the model was, but all I remember, this thing was a tank. Like, I'm a big, strong guy, people, and this thing, needed a freaking forklift to get out. And it was just one of those core switches. I think Brocade ended up buying Foundry. I don't remember. Anyways, all the things I used to know. Anyways, so I like setting this down on the ground, and we're thinking like, anybody here a forklift or like got a power jack we can get? And like we're all sitting around trying to figure out like how we're going to move this thing out of the data center. And it's one of those janky old data centers from like the late 90s. So it's not like it's got a nice, smooth, clean cut to the door and everything. So,
yeah.
But that just happens. You're sitting there and you're trying to solve problems. Like I remember one guy, he had to fly a server to the UK, and so to solve the problem, they just bought an extra plane ticket.
Yep, done that.
And his job as like the new guy was to sit next to the server, fly it to the UK, deliver it, install it, and fly back the same day.
Oh, no, you got to add some fun stuff to it, man. That's the perks.
Yeah. So, engineering of all kinds, I love it. Like, it's just if you, as an IT person, my complaint here is that I see a lot of IT people who end up getting these big egos. They're used to being the smartest person in the room.
Ooh.
And so like, oh, it's just a skid loader. I can figure this out. This is nothing.
Yeah.
That's dangerous. So, because other areas of engineering need to be respected. So that skid loader guy who looks like, maybe he drinks a 12 pack of Busch Light every night and, spends most of his days outside. That guy is just as good as you are in his field.
Yes.
He looks like that because he's been outside working these machines for the past 30 years. tap into his knowledge.
Yes.
Don't think you know more than he does. These blue collars are just as good of engineers as the white collars.
Yes.
And you got to respect that. Like, I have seen some of these skilled craftsmen do the most amazing things. I've seen them do some of the jankiest, crazy things too.
Yeah.
Like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Like, I watched a guy just like whip around on a forklift and grab a bobcat and just throw it over to the side. Well, he didn't throw it, but I'm like,
yeah.
Why don't you just drive it? Like, because it was faster this way.
Yes.
And it was safe.
Well,
like,
you're absolutely right. And
we happened, and the guy's just doing it like it's just another day. I'm like, man, I would just be so nervous doing that. But
we've touched on this before.
When I was building the skid loader, I made a mistake. And anybody who like follows me on Facebook has seen them. I thought that this ground, like after the rain, I thought the ground was structurally sound. I thought it had dried enough. Mm-hmm. And so I drove down in, and that part of the soil gave way. And so I sunk down 18 inches. Mm-hmm. And those mini skids do not have a lot of horsepower. So it was just high centered and stuck like glue.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler. There was a crane involved. There was a crane involved in this.
I couldn't get down. I got the crane. I rented a crane. I said, fine. Rented a crane. Actually talked to the engineer, the guys down at the rental place who were good with skids. I'm like, you're just going to get a crane and get that out. Here's a guy. So I called the first guy, and being true to my word, I checked multiple places for prices and ended up finding the people who put in my hot tub by accident, and they did it for cheap. Well, I should say cheap. They did it for half the price of the first person, and just moved it over 8 feet. 8 feet cost me $400, people.
That's an expensive move.
But once I was out, I was able to move just fine. I was able to move around. Now, what the second part that Skip doesn't know about, which was super freaky. So I'm sitting there like taking off an inch of soil at a time and making it nice and level, and I come across this white PVC pipe. I'm like, well, there's my sprinkler line. And so I'm like, I'm going to route my sprinkler because it was going under my pool. And so I'm like, okay. So me in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm going to route this around. It's just PVC. So I just slowly start scraping around the pipe, and I accidentally nicked the pipe. I'm like, I was going to break it anyways. I was going to cut it with a Sawzall. But underneath was twisted copper.
Really?
About a 3/4 of an inch thick.
That's some sort of telco line.
Sheathed.
Oh, yeah.
And I just grazed the top of it. Now that is, as a guy who worked for an electrical company, that scared the living bejesus out of me. I'm like, why wasn't this marked? I'm like, well, it's under a pool. How are they going to mark it? And so I sat there and I just sweated for like 5 minutes. I know, I've read the stories. I've seen the aftermath. This is not good. Yeah. Good thing I was on a skid loader. They're pretty well grounded. But anyways, as I started looking at it, there's colors to the wires. Okay. We're in low voltage world. Now we're getting closer to my level of engineering. I called my buddy. I'm like, hey, he did the 811 line, right? He was like director.
Wait, your buddies at the 811 line?
Yeah, actually, yeah. So the guy who ran the department, well, let's see. If you're listening, I am sorry, I'm butchering this, Dave. If for some reason, like he ran the department that ran the department, whatever. And these are very smart people, and the CAD department, and I'm like, what is this? So I sent him a picture of it, and he goes, that looks like an old telco line, just like what you said, Skip.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, and I start looking at it closer, and I get my nerves up, and I get a little closer to it, and I'm looking at it like, well, they wouldn't run it through this white PVC, and because it'd either be orange or blue or black, and so I look, and it's actually running under the PVC for the sprinkler line. And I actually turned on my sprinkler line to verify that it was a sprinkler line, and sure enough, water comes out. Okay, now I'm right realm. So I look closer, I'm like, wait a minute, those are the low voltage wires for the solenoids.
Oh, yeah.
So all you need to do now is pick that wire up and move it over to the side of the pool, or leave it buried under there. I'd rather not leave it buried under there in case I ever have to work on it.
Well, now that you messed with it,
for a sheer moment there, that one little piece of engineering I knew scared the crap out of me. And I immediately was like, crap. But now that I know it's the low voltage form, and I checked it, I verified, then went right to the box for my solenoids. It's running right in there, same colors of wires. So I'm feeling good about myself now. But at first, I was like, that's a freaking triple-aught copper cable.
Well, I want to back up to that skid loader guy that you mentioned earlier and the expertise that we have in there. And we've commented on this many times before, but in our roles as IT guys, a lot of the engagements that we have outside of our office, outside of the data centers, with any sort of customer end user setup, is there's this kind of unwritten expectation that we're going to show up with the answers, right? And it's just kind of been baked into a lot of our interactions. And so we like doing that. I mean, we feel comfortable going to a meeting. We want to know what the meeting's about, right? And we want to make sure we have our answers. We want to know, what is the capacity of whatever it is, how can this be deployed? What's the fix? That's just our nature many times as IT guys. And it's a self-fulfilling cycle that we get into. The problem is we can get a bit delusional. And I know for me, specifically in my younger days, there was a lot of hubris there, right? I'm the IT guy. I always have the answers because they're always asking technology questions, right? And so there was this false sense of I've got the answers, right? I've got the answers. And that's not always the case. And, we need to break out of that as IT guys. We need to recognize that there are, and most people do, maybe this is just me, my confession time, this is therapy or something here, that there's so many other people out there in so many different areas that have so much knowledge. And if we can just tap into that, it's a multiplier on what we know and can do. It's not additive. It's multiplication of what you can do. And
synergy.
There it is. There's the word. My first real experiences was moving from a government job, all right, which great people, but not a lot of motivation there to really go above and beyond, right? And I moved into an oil and gas industry. And the company I worked for was actually very motivated to grow and to expand and do new things. They were smaller but big, so they had the budget to do exciting stuff. And on my tour, my intro tour, I've walked around the building, and the guy that was leading me around had this, it was his thing. He referred to everybody as doctor, so this is Dr. So-and-so, this is Dr. So. They're just he was a friendly guy, and that's the way he did it. I thought it was kind of funny. And after a few weeks there, though, I realized that not all of his doctor introductions were made up, that while there weren't medical doctors, there were plenty of doctorates working in this organization. And this company had more brain power than I'd ever been exposed to. And all of a sudden I had this very humbling, very humbling, experience that, wow, I probably am not nearly as smart as I thought I was. But it was a great opportunity to now connect with all these other people and learn. Some of it was useless, for my job, but it was still great connections to really be a part of a team. And I think as IT guys, we can't let ourselves fall into this trap of we're the experts. No, we're part of an expert team, and you need to find your part in that.
We tend to, it's confirmation bias is the problem, is that we tend to think that because we've been the smartest go-to person for so long, that other people just don't get it. Like, oh, they don't get IT. That does not mean they're not intelligent.
Absolutely.
That does not mean that they're not very good at what they do. And you hear me say this all the time on the podcast. There are amazing people who have extremely brilliant minds that don't know how to type on a keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember when I got out of college, there was this guy came into our computer shop, and he needed to fill out a job application, but he could only fill it out online. And he's just sitting there. He's like, "Can I use one of the computers?" And yeah, we let people use our computers and come in and do things. And he was just trying his hardest to type out. He was a forklift operator. That's what he was. And this guy, looked like he was probably in his early 50s. He just never grew up in that world, right? But he wanted a job. And in order to get this new job, he had to apply online, and he was going to get good money for it. And I sat down and go, "Do you want me to type this up for you?" And he goes, "Yeah." And so he handed me his resume. I mean, the guy was like, he's searching for letters. I mean, he's like, "How do I make the letter?"
Yeah.
What question he had?
It's like, "Oh, this is going to be a while."
That's what it's like. He's like, "How do I make the letters big?" Like, I could have gone in the back of the shop and I could have continued working on PCs. Mm-hmm. But I sat there and saw this guy. I'm like, you know what? I could do everything he needs in like a minute, like 2 tops. And so I sat there and I typed out, and he had this extensive resume. I mean, just everything. And so I wrote out all of his skills, everything he was doing. And this guy was impressive. He just didn't know how to type on a computer. So an IT person like, "Oh, this guy's a moron. Like, they can't do the simplest thing like type." No, he's just a different kind of engineer. Yes. And I might as well use my skills to help him out. Now he's got a job that he would have had a very difficult time applying for before, getting paid better. I helped him out just by typing and knowing how to like navigate the web at the time, which was not a joy back in the early days.
Yeah, that is.
And we got this, and it was great. But this, this is what people need to know. Like, when whoever you're sitting across the table from in the room, just because they don't know what you know, doesn't mean they're a moron. It just means that they're in the upper left-hand quadrant of knowledge in your area. Imagine how they feel talking to you about profit and loss, about EBITDA. This guy's a moron. They're not treating like that because they're used to being that on the other side. They're used to being like in the finance world or in the CEO world. How do you dig yourself out of cash flow deficit? Give me different examples on how you dig that out. CEO is going to be like, "Okay, here's how we're going to do it."
Yeah.
The engineer is going to be like, "Okay, we can figure it out." But you're going to be missing a lot of knowledge there, and you're not going to quite have that wisdom of the losses. Just like when somebody says, "Hey, how do I build a data center? Or how do I build out a firewall?" A network admin is going to be like, "Okay, here's how we do it. Here are the best practices. Here's what I know is going to work. In fact, I've got 16 configs over here. I can just copy and paste over and get us a jump start."
Yep.
And save myself, 10 hours. The different kinds of engineering, different kinds of expertise need to be respected.
Yeah,
whether
that's what I was going to say.
Or it's building a data center, or it's working with a finance officer, you got to think through, what does the person across the table know and what can you learn from them? So that, as Skip said, when you work together, you create something even more amazing than, "Hey, you do the finance side, I'll do the IT side, and then we'll meet together at the end." No. You do it together.
Do it together.
Along the way, you can use this incidental experience and knowledge to say, "Hey, while you're doing that, why don't you just go ahead and script it?" "Well, I'd love to script it, but I don't know how." And you get together. Yep. So the wrong kind of engineer is a problem I have. And we've been talking in an area I don't know about. But the trick is, find somebody who does. Find the expert, leverage them, talk to them, and then know where you have a limit.
Yep.
So,
and we were talking about engineers, but it doesn't have to be technical. It doesn't have to be a hard science or something. There is just a tremendous amount of skill sets that are out there. Soft skills, hard skills. And Al, I'm going to call you out on this. I don't know if you'll listen to this, but great guy I worked with. He was an account manager, great salesman. But my standard joke, you've heard it before, is Al couldn't spell TCP/IP. All right. But he could do things that I simply could not do. Conversely, obviously, I could do things Al couldn't do, but together we could accomplish so much more. And that was a great experience for me, because by that point in my career, I'd realized, the hubris had worn off, right? And finding these connections and realizing that we can be so much more impactful by partnering with other great people in different areas, quit looking for someone just like yourself. Find someone different from yourself and capitalize on their great things, add it to yours. And well, I used the wrong word. It's not adding to yours. It's the multiplication, right? It is going to multiply what you get out of it.
Yeah. And you're going to have such a better time as an engineer, no matter where you are. But most people listening to this are MSP engineers, IT engineers. But when you start working with people, it's a multiplication. It's that synergy. I know it's a tired term, but it does mean something. When you actually converse and respect the person across the table from you and work together so they can correct you and you can correct them, then you can come up with something really cool.
Yep.
So, wrong kind of engineer. I thought it was a fun topic for today.
Yep.
Skip was a little skeptical when I brought it up, but
it had to get me thinking, but you got me going.
It's all about, like, sometimes you have to solve problems outside your comfort zone, and it's fun. But also, if you've got an expert there, you got a forklift operator who can give you some tips and tricks so you don't lose a leg, so you don't do $40,000 of damage to your deck or house. Listen to them; they're good. Thank you very much, Skip, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.